My name is Fletcher Grayson, and 10 days before my 30th birthday, I heard something that made my blood run cold. I was standing in the hallway outside my parents' study in our Kenilworth house, holding a small wrapped box I'd actually planned to give my mom. Their voices carried through the half-closed door low and excited like they were rehearsing a play. Then my mom laughed sharp and cruel and said exactly this. "We'll read the will on her 30th birthday right after the toast. She'll get so mad she'll storm out and never come back. Perfect way to finally kick her out of the family for good." My dad added calm as anything, "Everyone will be there. 250 guests. She won't dare make a scene." My brother Crew chuckled. "Make sure the cameras catch her face when it happens." I didn't move, didn't breathe. The box in my hand suddenly felt heavier than anything I'd ever carried. They weren't just planning to humiliate me, they were planning to erase me on my own birthday in front of Chicago's entire elite crowd. I backed away quietly, left the box on the entry table, walked to my car, and drove into the night. That was the moment I decided they were about to get a surprise of their own. If you've ever had family turn on you when you least expected it, stay with me. This one gets crazy. Hit that like button if you're already hooked, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next, and let's get into it. To understand why my parents wanted to kick me out on the exact day I turned 30, you have to go back years earlier to when everything in our Kenilworth, Illinois house still looked flawless from the outside. The Grayson name meant something around Chicago. My father, Sinclair Grayson, owned a chain of high-end cosmetic dentistry clinics where a single smile makeover could run $50,000 and still have a waiting list. My mother, Helena Grayson, was the woman every charity in the North Shore fought to put on their board. She could sell out a gala before the invitations even went to print and still have the house ready for a magazine shoot the same afternoon. And my older brother, Crew Grayson, 34 at the time, had finished his maxillofacial surgery fellowship at 31, and was already the name partners whispered when they needed someone to fix a celebrity's jaw after a skiing accident. Then there was me. From the time I was in high school, the path was carved in stone: pre-med at Vanderbilt Dental or Medical School. After that, then slide neatly into the family business. Dad kept a leather-bound planner on his desk with every milestone already written in. Mom started a Pinterest board for the engagement party she was positive would happen before I finished residency. I made it through one semester of organic chemistry before I knew I was done. The labs made my skin crawl, the pre-med students competed over who could sound more exhausted, and every family dinner circled back to insurance reimbursements and how many chairs we could add to the new Gold Coast location. One February night, I stayed up until sunrise, researching something else entirely commercial: photography studios, event venues, real estate listings in up-and-coming neighborhoods. By the time the sun came up, I had a different future in my head, and 2 weeks later I withdrew, loaded my car, and drove home to tell them in person. The kitchen went quieter than I'd ever heard it. Dad set his espresso cup down so hard the saucer cracked. Mom's face did that thing where the smile stays but the eyes go completely blank. Crew, home for a long weekend, leaned against the counter with his arms folded and watched like he'd paid for front row seats. Dad broke the silence first. "You're walking away from a 7-figure future." Mom's voice came out softer, which somehow cut deeper. "People will talk, Fletcher. This isn't just about you." Crew gave a small, satisfied laugh. "Hope whatever camera you buy is worth sleeping on someone's couch." Less than 30 days later, every financial lifeline was gone. No allowance, no car payment, no emergency credit card, nothing. Mom started leaving community college brochures on the kitchen island. Whenever she knew I might stop by, each one bookmarked to dental hygiene programs. Dad removed my name from the family membership at the country club without even telling me. I found out when they asked for my ID at the gate. At holidays, I became the ghost at the table. Conversation flowed around me like I was made of glass. They never raised their voices. Graysons don't raise their voices. They simply edited me out one frame at a time. New family photos went up on the mantle with crew moved to the center. Christmas letters listed Sinclair Helena and crew as if I'd been a typo the printer fixed. When old friends asked about me at parties, Mom's answer never changed a sad little tilt of the head and the words, "Fletcher is still figuring things out." I heard her say it once while I stood 10 feet away, holding a plate of food no one had offered me. She never glanced in my direction. I learned to enter rooms without making noise, to keep my answers short, to wear long sleeves so no one could comment on the camera strap marks across my shoulders. Speaking up only made the erasure faster, so I stopped. Silence was the only thing they couldn't take away. So I took the few $1,000s I'd saved from summer jobs, rented a studio apartment above a bar in Wicker Park, and started shooting anything that paid: engagement sessions, corporate headshots, bar mitzvahs, whatever showed up. I worked 18-hour days, ate cereal for dinner more nights than I want to admit, and funneled every dollar back into gear and marketing. Within 3 years, I had a 6-month waiting list and a loft studio in the West Loop. My family never asked what I was doing. They assumed I was one bad month away from crawling back. That assumption was the one thing I let them keep. They had no idea how big my company had already grown or what I'd quietly bought with the profits. While they thought I was failing, I was quietly building everything from zero. The first year was brutal. I shot 12 weddings every weekend from May through October, edited until 3 in the morning, then delivered galleries before anyone else in the city. Clients started talking. Brides recommended me to their planners, planners recommended me to venues, and suddenly I needed more space than the one-room loft I had been using. Instead of leasing another studio that someone else owned, I decided to buy. That was when I set up the LLC. I chose a name that meant nothing. Lakeview Property Holdings registered it in Delaware and hired a management company to handle all communication, so my real name never appeared on a single letterhead. My accountant called it boring. I called it perfect. 2 years later, the perfect building came on the market, a 6-story Beaux-Arts beauty on Oak Street in the Gold Coast, right in the heart of where Chicago's richest get married and throw parties. The listing price made even seasoned investors blink, but I had spent every dollar of profit instead of spending it on cars or clothes, and the numbers worked. I closed in cash before anyone else could bid. The building had everything: 35-foot ceilings on the top floor, original crown molding north-facing windows that photographers dream about, and a rooftop with a view straight down Michigan Avenue. I turned the 5th and 6th floors into the most exclusive photography and event studios in the city. White walls, seamless backdrops, a full kitchen for caterers, even a private bridal suite that magazines fought to shoot in. The lower floors I leased to high-end vendors who paid premium rent just to have the address on their cards. Then came the part that still makes me smile. Dad had been looking for a new flagship location for Grayson Cosmetic Dentistry at exactly the same time. Mom wanted a street-level studio for the luxury wedding division. She was launching something that screamed old money elegance. Their real estate agent showed them my building. They fell in love with the lobby marble, the brass elevators, the way the light poured in at golden hour, and they signed a 15-year lease at Market Plus rates, without ever knowing who actually owned the deed. From that day forward, every time someone asked where the new Grayson flagship was, Mom would beam and say, "We bought the most gorgeous building on Oak Street, the crown jewel of the Gold Coast." Dad put the address on every piece of marketing. Crew had his headshots taken on my rooftop for his new website. They threw their annual client party on my 6th floor and told 400 guests that the Grayson family now owned the most coveted event space in Chicago. They never checked the public records. Why would they? In their minds, only a Grayson could own something that perfect. Only one person on earth knew the truth. My best friend Natalia Cortez is a commercial real estate attorney who moonlights as the person who keeps me sane. We met in a coffee shop when I was 25 and still sleeping on an air mattress. She saw me editing on a cracked laptop, asked what I shot, and 2 hours later we were business partners in everything but paperwork. Natalia handled every closing, every contract, every amendment, and she never breathed a word. When the management company sent late notices or repair requests, she made sure the letters came from Lakeview Property Holdings and nothing else. Every quarter, I watched the rent checks hit my account, direct deposits from Grayson Cosmetic Dentistry and Grayson Wedding Studio, and I never said anything. I paid the taxes, kept the elevators running, replaced the roof when it leaked, and watched the value climb, while my family told the world they owned the place. By the time I was 28, the building was worth nearly triple what I paid, and the waiting list for my studios was 18 months long. I could have sold it for enough to retire anywhere, but I didn't. I liked knowing that every veneer Dad placed, every bridal consultation Mom booked, every celebrity smile crew rebuilt happened under a roof that actually belonged to the daughter they had written off. I kept waiting for the day it would feel like enough. It never did. Instead, I just kept working, kept improving the property, kept the books clean, and let them keep bragging. Because the longer they believed the lie, the bigger the fall was going to be, when they finally learned whose name was really on the deed. 10 days before my 30th birthday, I came home early. I had finished a corporate shoot downtown and decided to drop off the gift I'd picked out for Mom, a vintage enamel compact she'd mentioned once in passing. The house was quiet when I let myself in through the side door the way I still did, even though I hadn't lived there in years. I heard voices coming from Dad's study at the end of the hall, low and animated with bursts of laughter that didn't sound like the usual business talk. I walked closer, the wrapped box light in my hand, and stopped just outside the cracked door. Mom was speaking first, her tone the one she used when she was directing volunteers at a gala. "We open with the toast at 8 sharp," she said. "Sinclair gives the speech about family legacy. Then I introduce the reading of Grandfather's will. Fletcher will be standing right there with the cake, so the timing is perfect." Dad's voice came next, steady and satisfied. "We make sure every major donor is in the room. The lawyers will have the documents ready on the podium. Once it's read, she'll have no choice but to accept it publicly, or make a scene in front of 250 witnesses." Crew laughed, the sound sharp and quick. Either way, she loses. If she storms out, she proves she doesn't belong. If she stays quiet, she accepts the cut. I already told the videographer to zoom in on her face the second the executor says her name isn't on the list. Mom continued, almost giddy. "We'll have the new family portrait taken right after, just the three of us. The photographer can crop her out of the group shots later. By the time the night ends, everyone will know the Grayson line continues through Crew and his future children, not some photographer who couldn't hack it in medicine." I stood frozen in the hallway, the compact box suddenly cold against my palm. They weren't just planning to exclude me from the inheritance Grandfather had rewritten years ago. They were turning my own birthday into the stage for it. The cake, the toast, the cameras, all of it designed to force me into a corner where the only options were humiliation or exile. Dad spoke again, his voice dropping to that boardroom tone he used when closing a deal. "We've let this go on long enough. She's had 8 years to come around. Reading the will on her 30th birthday sends the message loud and clear. The Grayson name isn't a safety net for failures." Mom added, softer but no less certain. "And if she gets angry and leaves for good, even better. One less embarrassment at holidays." Crew snorted. "I'll make sure the society pages get the photos. Grayson heir, disinherited at lavish birthday gala." The headlines write themselves. They kept going, mapping out every detail: where the podium would stand, which cousin would hold the microphone, how long to pause, after the executor announced that my share had been redirected to a scholarship fund in Crew's name. Each word landed like a separate blow, precise and practiced, until the laughter started again, this time at a joke Mom made about how I'd probably show up in jeans and ruin the aesthetic anyway. I never made a sound. My heart hammered so hard I was sure they'd hear it through the door, but they didn't. They were too busy perfecting the script. I backed away one step at a time, the carpet swallowing my footsteps until I reached the foyer. I set the compact on the console table next to the mail, the ribbon still perfect, and walked out without looking back. The drive to my apartment blurred past. Streetlights smeared into streaks of gold and red, and I kept both hands tight on the wheel just to feel something solid. When I finally parked, I sat in the silence for a long minute, staring at the dashboard clock. 10 days. That was all I had before they turned my milestone into their finale. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I just opened my phone, pulled up the calendar, and started counting hours. That night, I didn't go back to my apartment. I drove straight to Natalia's office in the Loop, instead the one with the 24-hour keycard access she kept for insane deadlines. It was past 11 when I texted her from the parking garage, and she answered with a single thumbs-up emoji and the door code. By the time I reached the 32nd floor, she already had the lights on, 2 laptops open, and a pot of coffee brewing like this was completely normal. She took one look at my face and didn't ask questions. I dropped into the chair across from her desk, opened the property management portal on my phone, and turned the screen so she could see the Oak Street building file. Natalia leaned forward, scanned the lease summary, and let out a low whistle. "Your parents are 4 months behind," she said, clicking into the payment history. 4 full months, Fletcher. That's a material breach right there. And the escalation clause kicks in next quarter. Rent jumps 40% automatically if they miss another cycle. I nodded the numbers, confirming what I had only suspected. They had been so busy planning my public execution that basic bills slipped. Natalia pulled the master lease from the digital vault, the one she had drafted years ago when I bought the place, and we started reading every paragraph like it was written for this exact moment. The default provisions were generous by Chicago standards, 30 days to cure once served proper notice, but the termination clause was ironclad. Combine non-payment with the coming rate hike, and I had more than enough cause to end the entire agreement. Natalia's fingers flew across the keyboard, drafting documents faster than I could keep up. First came the formal notice of default itemizing every missed payment and the interest accruing daily. Then, the notice of intent to terminate, giving them exactly 30 days from delivery to vacate both the clinic and the wedding studio. She added a demand letter for the back rent plus late fees, a number that now topped 6 figures. Every page carried the letterhead of Lakeview Property Holdings and nothing else. We worked straight through the night. Around 3 in the morning, we ordered Thai food to the conference room and kept going, spreading papers across the table like a war map. Natalia pulled county records to confirm the chain of title was still clean, double-checked that no amendments had been filed, without my signature, and attached copies of the original lease with my initials on every page. By 6, the packet was complete, 23 pages of legal notices, certified mail labels, and courtesy copies for their corporate counsel. She even scheduled a commercial process server to hand-deliver everything to Dad's personal assistant at the clinic on Monday morning. The birthday was still 9 days away. We had time. I stared at the thick stack when she slid it across the table. It looked harmless, just another manila envelope, but it carried the power to take away the one thing they bragged about most. Natalia watched me for a long moment, then spoke quietly. "You sure you want to serve this at the party itself?" she asked. "We could send it tomorrow and let them scramble all week." I shook my head. They had chosen the stage. I was only giving them the performance they deserved. We sealed the envelope, wrote Mom's full name on the front in Natalia's perfect handwriting, and set it aside for the courier we would hire closer to the date. Then we cleaned up the conference room, wiped the whiteboards, and left before the city woke up. I drove home with the sunrise behind me, the weight in my chest finally replaced by something colder and clearer. 9 days. That was how long they had left to enjoy the lie. The night of my 30th birthday, the Kenilworth mansion glowed like a wedding cake under 1,000 tiny lights. White tents stretched across the back lawn, orchids flown in from Hawaii, spilled out of crystal vases, and a string quartet played on the terrace, while valets in white gloves parked Bentleys and Maybachs along the circular drive. 250 of Chicago's most important people had shown up in black tie and diamonds, all of them ready to toast the Grayson family's continuing brilliance. The photographers Mom hired circled like polite vultures, capturing every perfect moment for the society pages. I stood near the grand staircase in the midnight blue gown Natalia had forced me to buy, smiling the same practiced smile I had perfected years ago. Dad raised his glass at exactly 8 o'clock and launched into the speech he had rehearsed for weeks, talking about legacy excellence and the bright future of Grayson cosmetic dentistry. The crowd applauded on cue. Crew stood beside him, looking like a cologne ad, and Mom beamed at the front table in pale gold silk, clutching the leather folder that held grandfather's will. Everything was going according to their script. At 8:30, the cake arrived, 5 tiers of champagne and gold leaf, carried by 6 servers, while the quartet switched to Happy Birthday. Phones lifted into the air. Flashbulbs popped. I blew out the candles to thunderous applause, and Mom dabbed at the corner of her eye with a monogrammed napkin for the cameras. Dad announced that before dessert they had one very special family announcement. The room quieted instantly. That was my cue to leave. I slipped through the side door onto the terrace, walked down the stone steps, and disappeared into the garden before anyone noticed I was gone. By the time Mom took the microphone to introduce the reading of the will, I was already in the car Natalia had waiting at the service gate. Back inside at exactly 7:30, a courier in a crisp navy suit walked straight through the front doors carrying a thick cream envelope. He moved with purpose past the string quartet, past the ice sculptures, and stopped directly in front of Mom. The return address read only Lakeview Property Holdings. Urgent legal notice. Mom smiled the way she always did with unexpected deliveries, thanked him sweetly, and opened it right there under the chandelier, because refusing would have looked rude. The room went quieter than I have ever heard 250 people go. Mom's face drained of color so fast her lipstick looked painted on. She tried to close the envelope, but Dad was already reaching for it, his voice sharp. "Give me that." He pulled out the stack of papers and started reading aloud before he realized what it was. The words carried perfectly in the sudden silence. Notice of default and termination of lease. Premises located at 111 East Oak Street. Landlord Lakeview Property Holdings LLC, tenant Grayson Cosmetic Dentistry LLC, and Grayson Wedding Studio LLC. Immediate vacate required within 30 days. He stopped when he reached the signature block. The room could hear his breathing. Landlord Fletcher Grayson. Someone's champagne glass slipped and shattered on the marble. Then another. Phones that had been filming the cake now turned toward the head table. Mom made a small choking sound and clutched the edge of the chair. Crew stepped forward like he was going to snatch the papers away, but the courier was already gone. Dad kept flipping pages faster now, as if speed could change the words. The demand letter listed every missed payment, every late fee, the coming rent increase, and the total amount due within 10 business days. The final page was the notice to vacate, stamped in red. Failure to comply will result in lockout and legal action. A woman near the front whispered loud enough for half the room to hear. "Did that just say, Fletcher owns their building?" The whisper became a wave. People turned to their neighbors, eyes wide, mouths open. Someone started recording vertically. The string quartet faltered and stopped playing altogether. Mom finally found her voice. "This has to be a mistake," she said, laughing too high and too loud. There's obviously been some clerical error. But her hands were shaking so hard the papers rattled. Dad tried next, forcing that boardroom calm he was famous for. "We'll have our attorneys handle this first thing Monday morning. Please everyone enjoy the dessert stations." No one moved toward the dessert stations. Crew's phone buzzed in his pocket, then Mom's, then Dad's all at once. The clinic manager, the wedding division director, the property management company, they thought they owned every vendor who had ever leased space in that building, suddenly realizing who the real landlord was, and that the rent was now in default. The phones kept buzzing like angry hornets. A reporter from Chicago Magazine who had been invited because Mom loved the publicity pushed through the crowd and asked Mom directly, "Mrs. Grayson, can you comment on reports that your daughter has just served eviction papers on the family business?" Mom opened her mouth and nothing came out. Dad put a hand on her elbow to steady her, but his own face had gone gray. Crew looked around for me, scanning the room, finally realizing I wasn't there to be humiliated after all. The orchestra conductor, unsure what else to do, lifted his baton and tried to start the next song. Nobody was listening anymore. Conversations exploded everywhere, at once, voices rising over the clink of abandoned champagne flutes. Someone laughed nervously. Someone else said my name like they were tasting it for the first time. Mom's phone rang again, and this time she answered it, thinking it might be their lawyer. Instead, it was the building superintendent confirming he had received the lock change order effective 30 days from today. She dropped the phone. It clattered across the marble and spun to a stop at a senator's wife's heel. The perfect Grayson birthday gala, the one that was supposed to erase me forever, had just become the night the entire city learned I had owned their empire all along, and I wasn't even in the room to watch it happen. When Mom called, I was standing on the porch of a cabin on Lake Geneva, the night wind carrying the smell of pine and cold water across the lake. My phone had been vibrating nonstop for 20 minutes. I finally pulled it out. Saw her name flashing and answered. "Where the hell are you?" Her voice cracked the second the call connected, shrill and desperate. I let the silence hang for 3 full seconds before I spoke, low and even. "Did you like the gift?" She started screaming again, words tumbling over each other. "Fletcher, stop this right now. You're destroying everything we built. Call your lawyer. Tell them it's a mistake. We'll pay whatever you want." "No," I said. "You taught me the Grayson name has a price. Tonight you finally found out what it is." She tried one last time, almost pleading. "Come home. People are still here. We can fix this." "You wanted an audience," I answered. "You got one. Goodbye, Mom." I ended the call, blocked her number, blocked. Dad's blocked Crew's, blocked every Grayson contact still in my phone. Then I turned the screen off and looked out at the black water. For the first time in years, the weight in my chest was gone. 2 months later, the lockout happened exactly as scheduled. At 6 o'clock on a gray October morning, the building superintendent changed every lock on Oak Street, while Dad stood on the sidewalk yelling at sheriff's deputies who wouldn't let him past the yellow tape. Patients with 6-figure smile appointments found the doors chained and a legal notice taped to the glass. Brides arrived for final consultations to discover the wedding studio dark and empty. By 9, the story was the top local news alert: Grayson family empire evicted by own daughter. They relocated the clinic to a second-floor suite above a subway in Skokie beige carpet and buzzing fluorescent lights, replacing Italian marble and crystal chandeliers. The wedding division shut down completely. No one wanted their big day associated with that headline. Charity boards quietly dropped Mom's name from their mastheads. Invitations to the North Shore galas dried up overnight. Crew lost 3 national speaking engagements the moment organizers saw his last name trending for all the wrong reasons. Dad filed an emergency lawsuit, of course. Their attorneys claimed fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, intentional infliction of emotional distress. The judge dismissed everything at the first hearing. The lease was bulletproof, the default undisputed. Natalia stood beside me in court, calm in a charcoal suit, while Dad stared at the table and refused to meet my eyes. When the case was thrown out, he finally looked up for half a second, and I saw something I had never seen on his face before: pure panic. They sold the Kenilworth house 8 months later to cover legal bills and the mountain of debt that followed. The new owners painted over the family crest above the fireplace. I know because the listing photos landed in my inbox by accident. I deleted them without saving a single one. I never attended a single closing or court date after that first hearing. I didn't need to. The money wired, the titles transferred, and I turned the top floors into a creative residency that now hosts artists from all over the world. Every time I walk through the lobby, I see someone new making something beautiful in the space my family once called their crown jewel. It feels like the final signature on a very long contract. I still receive the occasional forwarded message, a cousin I haven't spoken to in a decade, a charity mom used to run, someone asking if I'd consider reconciling for the sake of appearances. I delete them unread. Some doors only open one way. The lesson is simple, and I live it every single day. Never underestimate the quiet one. The one who stops fighting, who leaves the room without slamming it, who builds an entire empire while everyone else is busy talking about how they've already failed. We hear everything. We remember everything. And when the moment comes, we don't need to scream. We just change the locks. Thank you so much for staying with me until the very last word. If this story hit you in the chest, made you angry, made you cheer, made you think of your own family, please tell me in the comments. Have you ever been the one they counted out? What did you do about it? I read every single one. And if you know someone who needs to hear that walking away can be the strongest move you'll ever make, share this with them. See you in the next one.